being in the creative industry and always having to think creatively, it gets incredibly draining, especially trying to come up with ideas every single day. So we do battle with that quite a lot, and we've put this pressure on ourselves to shoot content ourselves rather than repurposing content, because we do have that creative eye and we do have those skills, and we want to showcase the clothing in their most raw and authentic state as well. These big model e-com shoots is not an accurate representation of what these clothes look like on real people, so we really took that upon ourselves to do all of that.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. So today we are actually speaking to one of my previous clients. So back when I was still freelancing, I had the privilege to work with two phenomenal ladies or women, Ellie and Madi. And they own, run, and basically do everything for their company called By Maverix. By Maverix is a sustainable, conscious clothing store. And we're going to hear a little bit about what their journey has been into the sustainable fashion space, as well as both of their respective backgrounds. This is also the first time we have two guests on the show, so it's going to be quite an interesting dynamic. I just have to mention, to break the ice, previously or just before we started recording, I discovered your YouTube channel. And I'm not a YouTuber or at all, but I absolutely love your YouTube channel. And there was one specific video that nearly made me faint. I saw the one title of, don't make this mistake when you build your website, our website disaster. And here I'm going, oh fuck. I'm literally getting these two girls on our podcast to talk about, our journey. And I helped them with their website.
It wasn't you. It
wasn't you.
No.
Don't worry. It was not you.
Thank you for validating
that. I wasn't looking forward to a horror story from Steph's past.
Yeah, that's actually why we're here. We're here to talk.
But anyway, welcome, guys.
Thank you.
We're here to confront you.
No. Oh gosh. Nice.
Definitely.
Well, you guys are actually based in New Zealand, and I was just saying you either looked extremely relaxed being on camera, maybe it's because you guys have a YouTube channel, or you're just extremely tired because it is quite late. I know you've been extremely busy with, pop-up shops and just, guess, woman running a business, right?
Yeah. Yep. A bit of both, honestly.
Yeah, we both work part-time on top of our business as well. So, yeah, there's a lot going on.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe to get us started, I think, Ellie, let's start with you. Can you maybe share a bit about your background and what you're currently doing? A little bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. So I actually studied quite a unique degree in New Zealand, Wellington, and it's called a Design for Social Innovation, and it basically takes complex or wicked problems such as climate change or famine, anything around so deemed this wicked problem, and we design solutions for that. And so, yeah, it was an amazing degree that sort of opened my eyes to how you can influence society with design. And so from that, I actually moved into the world of advertising, where you kind of use that mindset, but with a marketing lens, bit more commercial, wasn't quite what I was after, but it was a great introduction to the industry. I also have a photography background as well. Sort of, I did a little bit at school, but self-taught over the last sort of 5 years, and really had this interest in people and fashion, and that sort of led me into the advertising world. And from there, I moved into a consultancy where I was it was called a design innovation consultant, which it sort of lived out exactly what I studied, which was amazing. I worked with a lot of different clients in vast different areas of industry, and was able to spread ideas of from CX through to UX through to UI, from physical experiences to digital experiences, and that was it was a big turning point in my career personally, because I was exposed to ins and outs of all these different businesses, and I sort of had this epiphany of I feel like I could take this on. I feel like I could do something with a business. I was really sick of looking at something in a really narrow view, problems in businesses that were, just this one little piece of the puzzle, and you can't, and it doesn't work like that. You need to look at a business holistically, and I just really wanted to take it on. Mads and I were doing wedding photography at the time as well. We both sort of thought we've both got this amazing skill set. Let's merge it and do something that can get us a bit of income, but also a bit creative as well. So we started going down that realm, and as we sort of progressed in that business, we started talking about the fashion industry and how frustrating it was, and that there was no place where you could go and know that there was sustainable clothing there, because what is sustainable fashion? Like, it was just there's so much ambiguity around the industry and where to go and who to believe, and greenwashing, that it was just really frustrating as a consumer. And so we just started talking to friends, we started doing research, and yeah, basically it was a long year of research and validating our problem and solution. And yeah, we got on that journey, which I'm sure we can take you down in depth later. And in the meantime, I'm just doing consulting, customer experience strategy along the side of our business now. So that's my background.
Nice.
Amazing. So that's great, and I look forward to kind of going into a little bit about how you guys approached this challenge. And I think one of the things that really stood out for me is there are a lot of people who complain about problems that they see, and they are the first person at the party to kind of bring up the topic that they're passionate about, but when it actually comes down to action, they suddenly just disappear. So I think it's amazing that you guys actually, saw a problem and started doing something about it. But before we go into that, Madi, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background, and maybe, try to focus in on how you guys, like, what initially brought you guys together from your perspective? Because I think it's always an interesting thing when two people decide to start something together. I think like myself and Steph have our own sort of story, and kind of like there's usually a specific element that kind of brings people together when they start a business. So it'd be great to hear a bit about that from your perspective.
Absolutely. I guess my background is a little bit different to Ellie. I studied a business degree, and I think growing up I always knew at some point in my life I would head down this path. I've been surrounded by entrepreneurs, I guess, my whole life, and I was always inspired by that. And, I knew that was going to be my path. I just wasn't sure how I was going to get there. So I studied a business degree, and then I moved straight into advertising. Where honestly the experience I've gained from that background has been invaluable, and has really been those building blocks to get me to where I am now. But the avenue that I went down was much more of that digital, social focused avenue, and I kind of started that market just as social media and digital and advertising online was really booming. So I feel like I got that first inside knowledge and step into this whole, I guess, background world of how can you actually get an idea out there and in front of people. So I kind of headed down that digital path for, 6+ years, and it has gone so hand in hand with the experience that Ellie has. I had been working with huge fast fashion brands across New Zealand and Australia, and that's where I got this insight knowledge into the fashion industry. But I also worked out that, like, these fashion brands were coming to me for not just this marketing advice, but also business advice. And I realized I was starting to become this business consultant for these massive brands. And I think me and Ellie were talking one day, and I was like, I feel like I have the skills to accelerate their brand. I've got this digital marketing experience. You've got this CX, customer design experience. These two areas are so fundamental in brands these days. Like, I think we both have the skill set to really make this happen and make this work. And I think, and we both have a passion for fashion, as cliche as that sounds, but the market itself is so saturated, and we didn't want to just be another fashion brand with no purpose. I think for us, we were like, there's a massive problem in the fashion industry. There's lack of transparency. No one's doing good by the environment. Like, let's actually be that brand that's purpose driven and is doing something different, and there's meaning behind it. And that's kind of where, I guess, Maverix and the fruition of the idea really came to the forefront.
Amazing.
Nice. Can you guys briefly just explain for the people listening what Maverix, the platform, is? Do you guys make the clothes yourself? What is exactly the product offering?
We're a curated boutique. So we stock designers from around the world that all have sustainable and ethical practices. But we also have a Made by Maverix basics line within that. So we have our own brand as well, but predominantly we stock brands.
Amazing. And I guess that's not the typical approach that you might think, especially for a person who maybe is, ignorant of the space and is kind of like looking in from the outside. You might think because there's a problem in the fashion industry, an approach might be to actually go and make the clothing yourself and actually do the heavy lifting of developing a sustainable brand from the perspective of the manufacturing. Is there a reason why you guys instead decided to go more like the curator's route, or how did that sort of come to be? I don't know if you want to share your thoughts, Madi.
It was, there was two sides to it. It was a bit of a strategic play to start stocking brands off the get-go, because there's some amazing brands across the world that are doing really great by the environment. They just don't have a platform that's showcasing their brand. And because New Zealand is on the other side of the world, we are very behind when it comes to sustainability, but also having access to brands from around the world. So we actually wanted to be able to bring these people to New Zealand and start showcasing them that way. But we also knew that because some of these brands are really credible and huge worldwide, we could actually start to kind of leverage off their names to get ourselves out there. We know it's incredibly hard to launch a brand these days organically, and for that process to pick up really quickly. So there was a strategic play to that. And also, creating your own product is incredibly difficult. We learned that the hard way, and like, kudos to all these fashion brands and designers out there. It's so hard, and especially if you're trying to do it the right way and do good for the environment. Like, the process is just, it's phenomenal. And so there was kind of two sides to doing it that way.
Sure. That's very interesting. And when you put it like that, the fact that you were looking at the brand and how you can get the fastest amount of reach when you guys launch, it makes sense, the approach you guys took. And it is interesting what you say, and I think we need to almost repeat that to realize that it is hard to create a product like a piece of garment, because as a consumer, it doesn't look that hard, right? It's very easy for me to walk out the door, go to the nearest shop, buy very cheap clothes. It feels easy, and especially if you look at fast fashion, which is the more affordable, cheap, quick labor producing garments, it's also cheap. So we also equate something that's cheap to something that's easy to make. And it's not necessarily that it's easy to make. It's just there's a lot of processes behind it. And like you said, especially if you're trying to do it the right way. So a lot of brands use this word sustainable. And we're seeing some of the big clothing brands do it as well, like Zara and a bunch of other brands we have here in South Africa as well that throw around the word conscious and sustainable, and it doesn't quite tell us what it means. Can you maybe, Ellie, share, you guys are focusing on conscious, sustainable designers. What does that mean? What is behind that word?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is one of the biggest frustrations, not only for us as a business, but as a consumer as well, because there's so many variables to sustainability, as we know. It is one of those wicked problems. And so how can you really condense and define what that means? And so what we tried to do, and a part of our website, is that you can shop by specific values that our designers uphold. So all of our designers, we went through a big vetting process. So all of them we found around the world, we then contacted, and then we jumped on video calls and asked them about the backgrounds, that what they say on their website to what they actually do. And we have 12 values that you can shop by as a consumer, and they consume of things like fair trade, organic cotton, vegan, carbon neutral, like things like that. And so our designers will have to meet 4 of those values at least, and also be striving for more. But ultimately, that fundamental of their business needs to be slow fashion, needs to be seasonless, that their garments it's not trend based, they're made high quality. They really are striving to be better versions of themselves. And I think some of those designers have scale, it's much more accessible for them to produce more sustainably, because they have the resources and the time and the money. But those smaller ones, so we have some really beautiful artisan designers that hand knit things, but for them to get really great organic wool and things like that, it's a huge cost to them. So it's really the ethos of those designers is so important. And I think as consumers, we don't really, it's really hard for us to know what is sustainable and what isn't. So we're just trying to be a really transparent way of communicating that and bringing that emotional storytelling to the designer background, how the garments are made. Because once you build that emotional attachment with a garment and you pay a slightly higher price point, you're much more likely to cherish that, to respect that, to care for it more. Therefore, it will last, you'll wear it more, and it won't end up in a landfill. So it's not always about the purchase. It is about the consumption and how you cherish that garment for a lifetime that can really make the difference long term. And so, we're just trying to be a source of truth that people can go and trust us as a brand. There's a lot of variables to. Some designers are a lot better than others, and we are trying to explain that in the most digestible way possible, which is very challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I think the thing is as well, like, there is no such thing as a completely 100% sustainable brand. Like, it just doesn't exist right now. And I think for us, all we want to do is give people the option and the opportunity and the accessibility to make a better choice. And for us, it's about bringing designers to the forefront that we vet and we know, and they promise to us that they are actively taking steps to ensure that their supply chain's better, really, So, and it's hard as a consumer, because the word sustainability gets thrown around so much, and there's a lot of greenwashing happening in this space. But I think for us, like, we're not experts. We don't know everything about this space, but if we can start to educate ourselves and consumers at the same time, then we can all grow and learn together and start to just every day make better choices.
And I have to...
Sorry, Steph. I just would like, Madi, would you mind just explaining a little bit about what greenwashing is? Because for those who might not be in the space, who might not be following completely.
Of course. I guess greenwashing is one of those terms that it's trending. It's it's a bit of a marketing ploy, and it's a big word that's been used out there, but it's basically where, brands or companies put sustainable or ethical titles on things without having facts or information to back up what they're saying. So this fast fashion brand could say this $10 top is sustainable, but there's absolutely no information that proves that it is sustainable. And how is it sustainable if it's a $10 t-shirt? So I think that's a massive issue. And again, like, as consumers, it's not really our job to do the research and figure that out for ourselves. It's really like the brand's job to give us the right information, and that's what we're trying to do, is just provide people with correct information.
Amazing.
So I have to take my hat off to you both, because it's not a easy journey. It's still quite a unfamiliar territory, especially in some countries, or unfamiliar journey to step into a real sustainable business, especially in the fashion space. And Madi, you mentioned when you were consulting as well and working with big brands, you were a little bit more in the social side as well as a creative. Now, something I'm very intrigued about is, if we look at the previous sustainable movement, so to say, if I have to dumb it down, if we look at eating, veganism, right, which was quite a big movement that came about. And the approach that movement unfortunately took was a lot of shaming and guilt and fear instilling in people to try and get them to make or change decisions. And as someone who was aware and had experience or has experience in presenting a brand on social, telling a story to your consumers on a social platform, what is the approach you guys took? Because when I look at your brand, it doesn't feel like you're trying to make me feel guilty that I have H&M things in my cupboard.
Yeah, absolutely. And we never wanted to make people feel fearful of making the wrong choice, or, not being able to afford to make the right choice, or, we were very conscious of that. The biggest thing for us is, like, we're trying to be an inclusive brand. We're not trying to push this massive sustainable, you must do right by the environment, you must do this, you must do that. We're not trying to be like that at all. All we're trying to do is slowly educate people along the road without being do you know what I mean, Ellie?
Yeah, it's we're very, very strategic in trying to entice product and creativity and branding, and it's cool to care, and showing that actually sustainability should be the norm. These clothes are cool in their own right, and the fact that they're sustainable is like the icing on the cake, but really the fundamental of every business should be sustainability. So we're not trying to instill the fear aspect, because it's not gonna, people shy away, like I don't want to be on, especially on Instagram where it's like a time of pleasure and relaxation. When you're scrolling, I don't want to be feeling like, I feel so bad about myself, or the decisions that I've made because of the position I'm in. And so therefore I'm not going to engage in this brand. Like, we need to really bring people, as May said, along the journey and educate a bit at a time and go, thank you so much for supporting us. And by the way, did you know that your top you just bought was from vegan, fair trade, made by these beautiful women in Peru? And then people go, oh, that made me, that there was actually like these multipliers of good feeling. Not only do I look good, feel good, but I've actually done something good for the environment. Therefore, I might do that again and again and again.
And I think we wanted to, we want people to organically come to this conclusion on their own. I think the more you push something on a person, the more they're going to shy away and not going to want to do it. And I think that's been the problem with all of these big trends, like the move towards veganism and different things. It's like, I see it. It's so much in my peripheral. I don't want to be a part of it. I'm not jumping on this bandwagon. Whereas if we can just slowly implement it and slowly show people why it is better to make these choices, they'll come to that conclusion on their own, and they'll start to be like, yes, I want to do the right thing. And that's all we're trying to do. We would never force our opinions on people.
That's amazing. And I just want to highlight a couple of things, but also tie in something from one of the previous episodes that we had. So a previous guest that we had, his name is Jason Hobb. We were having a discussion with him about meaning. So he's an information architect by trade. So he's sort of in the same design sphere. And one of the topics we discussed is this idea of meaning making, and basically about how meaning is a part of the organizing of information and different platforms. But one of the things that he sort of focused in on was about how this sort of consumerist attitude is enabled by products and things not actually having intrinsic meaning. And the example he gave was, if somebody, for example, like if your grandmother, for example, gives you an earring that's $1, let's say, you're not going to throw those earrings away, even though they're so cheap, because there is an underlying meaning in the product. It's something that has more than its physical, tangible value. While if, for example, you go and you buy some kind of brand name or something like that, and then it gets damaged, you wouldn't be as driven to repair it or kind of keep using it as you would be when there is something meaningful attached to that piece, that article of clothing or whatever it might be. And then when I hear you guys speak about the approach that you sort of took to this, it makes me think instead of trying to guilt people into making a specific purchase decision, you sort of give them the information that they need to make their purchase meaningful. Because not only are you buying a great piece of clothing, at the same time, you're also supporting a specific kind of business practice. And you, in a sense, you're allowing your own personal values to be expressed in the clothes that you wear. And then I think the thing that sometimes goes wrong that Steph mentioned, when you sort of try to guilt people into making a specific decision, the meaning doesn't necessarily live on with that article of clothing. It instead becomes what's called a grudge purchase. And I think it's so amazing that you guys kind of took this different approach to approaching the problem of sustainability, and allowing, because the thing that I was thinking as you were speaking is, you can kind of imagine two worlds. The one world where I'm kind of, there's an Instagram post that says, you have to do this, and if you don't buy these specific clothes, you're a terrible person. And then I imagine that person, maybe they buy a piece of clothing and it's new, it's something new, but they were kind of guilted into it. You might not want to actually tell your friends about that. It's kind of like you don't want to share the negative aspect of it. But then if you think about it as maybe there's someone who goes on Instagram, they see a nice piece of clothing and they like the piece of clothing because of what it is. And then when they go and they do the research, they kind of see that not only is it a nice piece of clothing, there's also positive business practices underlying it. It's much easier to share that kind of a message, because you also don't feel like you're, being one of those Bible bashers trying to preach to everybody in the street. So I just think when you think about it from the perspective of the consumer, it's way easier. It's a much easier message to share. And I think I really I really appreciate that approach. And I think one of the things that I did want to ask a little bit about is that we've. Sorry, did you want to say something?
Sorry, my end is a little bit slow. I just wanted to say that, like, we did a lot of insight work, customer experience insights, and we are all very we're self-interested. Like, we are very, very selfish humans, and we knew this. And so as much as we'd like to think and tell people how great we want to do by the environment, and our behavior reflects that, unfortunately, intrinsically we are just very self-obsessed, and so clothing is always going to come first. The way we show up, our appearance is always going to be what people focus on first. So we knew that from the very beginning, and so that is the way you need to entice. We know people are still mourning about climate change and the world today, that if we come in as this brand that goes, yep, it's all terrible, if we don't change now we're all doomed, and we most likely are, but it's not going to win, no one's going to catch on, so we have to do it tastefully and in a way, in a manner that makes people want to accept it slowly. And yeah.
And Ellie, to actually add on to what you're saying, is I think what you guys have also done, or at least from me as an outsider, is by taking this approach, you also freeing up the two of you of a lot of criticism. Because as soon as you, as a business owner, especially as a woman, become very strongly opinionated about something, especially something that's ethical or sensitive topic, and you take accountability for that strong opinion, you open yourself up to a lot of judgment, right? It's like someone who, I used to be vegan for 9 years, and as soon as I stopped being vegan, I received a lot of criticism from family, and I'm not even in the public light. So if you were to take that approach, you're opening up yourself to a lot of that as well. And what you're now doing is the two of you're almost on this journey with a consumer as well, and trying to show that it's not about being perfect. It's not about taking an extremist approach. It's about adding just value where you can, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, before starting this journey, we definitely knew that at some point we would open ourselves up to potential criticism. But throughout this whole process, we've just, gone with our hearts, gone with what's felt right and what's right by the environment. Like I said, we're purpose-led first and foremost. It's not about money for us. It's about our passion and, spreading the right message. So we've gone with our gut and hope that, we didn't get too much, I guess, cop from that. But yeah.
That's amazing. And so I want to shift the conversation a little bit, because, one of the big challenges I think that you guys are addressing is the sustainability aspect. But one of the other big problems of fast fashion that's maybe a little bit removed from the consumer is from the perspective of the designers and the creatives in the production process for clothing. And so I'm hoping that we can talk a little bit about that. But I think maybe before we dive into that, could you maybe give us a little bit of a layman's idea of what fast fashion is conceptually? Like, it doesn't at all need to be a dictionary definition or anything like that, but just to give us a working understanding, because I'm hoping that we can, from that conversation, talk a little bit about how it affects the clothing designers, and what you guys are doing to sort of alleviate that. I don't know, Ellie, if you maybe want to give us that idea or description.
The terminology comes from exactly how it's produced, made. It is extremely fast at massive scale, and so this, when you think about anything in that light, obviously quality is going to dwindle. Labor the item isn't cherished. It is mass produced. They can jump on trends really quickly, exploit designers, get it out to the public. And when you're producing something at such a big scale, you're minimizing costs massively because it's at scale. So your price per materials, resources, labor is extremely low. Therefore, you can sell it at a price that's the same margin as a designer doing it as selling it for $500 and then top that's selling for 50. The margin's probably like very similar just because of the scale that they can do it. And so it's actually, the more you learn about it, the more disgusting it is. It comes in terms of the labor side. There's a lot of terrible things going on in the world, child labor and really, really badly underpaid workers and bad working conditions. So that unfortunately comes in those big factories, all unregulated. And so that's basically the terminology.
The average turnaround time for most fast fashion brands for collections is like a week, which, I mean, that puts things into perspective when most smaller brands can take 9 months to produce a collection, and these fast fashion brands produce them in a week. So that's why they jump on these trends and can actually mass produce very quickly and get them out. Hence the term fast fashion.
A lot of our designers that we stock.
That's crazy.
It's
almost hard to believe that.
Sorry. They actually, a lot of them are made to order, so it will literally, we'll have a call with them in January and we'll get it delivered in October. Like it's amazing. It takes so long, but it's the right way.
Wow.
And so I think one of the reasons that I wanted to start the conversation there, I think the first time I encountered the term fast fashion was in there was a Netflix special by a comedian named Hassan Minaj, and he talked about fast fashion, and that was the first time I'd ever encountered it. And one of the things that he also mentioned is that very often the fast fashion items would be knockoffs of original designer clothing. And it's easy as a consumer to say, like, these designer people, they don't really need all that much money. Who really cares if they sort of do knockoffs? But when you sort of think about what they're doing, and you think about really any creative space, the only thing that makes, in a sense, being creative a worthwhile endeavor is that the things that you create can belong to you, and you can essentially build your livelihood on a specific creative discipline. But then when you think about what in a sense fast fashion does for the designers of the clothing, it essentially it prevents you from making your work proprietary, because you kind of spend years and years like honing your skill and developing like a craft, and then over and above that you spend months actually designing that piece of clothing, doing all of the required groundwork to actually bring the design, not necessarily the physical item, but actually designing the piece. And then, as you said, like, what took you 9 months, a week later your competitors have got that same item or like a knockoff of it, but also it's at scale and it's at every single shop at every single corner. And in a sense it chokes the opportunity for the creative. And so I don't know if either of you would want to speak a little bit to like how what you're doing is either addressing or facilitating that the creatives in the whole life cycle.
It's the emotional attachment, it's the craftsmanship. Maddie and I have taken on board. We've how do I put this? We've actually started to promote ourselves, like sort of exposing those fast fashion outlets, ripping off other designers on our TikTok channel recently, which I don't think anyone's doing well enough, especially on TikTok. There are a few amazing Instagram channels on that called Diet Prada and St. Oaks and things that really sort of pull out those those players that are just ripping them off. But yeah, it's a really, really frustrating thing to see. And it's so, coming from like 3 years ago, I'd be going to fast fashion outlets and buying things, and it comes down to the consumer value. Like, you have to really, really dig deep and go, I am going to put put money where my mouth is and actually support the things that I do believe in. And when you see fast fashion ripping off designers, it's like replicating art, right? It's like a practice that they've been crafting for so long. It's so sad to see, and there should be regulations. Really, it's frustrating.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I think that's also a really nice story that you expressed there. That is maybe a story that consumers can also be more aware of, right? Especially consumers who are in the creative space, and usually the people who are in creative space take a lot of ownership of their appearance, because that's part of their creative expression, their creative identity. And if you as a creative know that you want to honor another creative and the process they go through, their creative process to come to fruition of their ideas, actually honoring that process. It is exactly that story, knowing that if you are buying into a fast fashion brand, you are possibly taking away from another creative. And I think that's that human connection and relating to them on a human level is another story that might help someone as a consumer.
100%. And I guess what's crazy is that from a design standpoint, you only have to change the design by 1% to be able to put it out there. And I think that's what's incredibly unfair, and that's why there's so many copycats out there, especially when fast fashion brands have the resources to jump on these trends and produce them the next day. But kind of like what Ellie said, it really comes down to you as a consumer, your intrinsic values and what you're willing to stand for. And I think for us as a brand, it's just about exposing people doing this and showing why you should be supporting the true artisans of these products versus the fast fashion brands.
And so maybe the big question, let's say one of these fast fashion brands is sort of like, we've kind of seen what Maverix is doing, and we think that you guys are you're heading in the right direction, like you're onto something, and we want to change. Like, what would you say to a brand as how could they be better? And I'm going to say this with the constraints of they still have their boss, they still have their shareholders that they need to report to. So how could they, from a practical perspective, actually start to go on a journey of improving things? Because I think it's easy.
Alfie, I also want to add on to your question when you're done before anyone answers.
I just wanted to add a bit of context, because I think with things like this, when big corporate is doing something wrong, it's easy, again, as I mentioned at the beginning, to sort of shake your finger at them. But it's much harder to actually do something about it. And at the end of the day, the people who are in these big corporates are actually just people like you and me. Now, some of them might be a little bit more malicious, but let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say that, let's say they decide that they do want to change. How can they approach that?
This question is exciting me so much. I could not help myself from always interrupting. I do want to make it a little bit more general, because this is something I've been wondering. And for, like Alfie said, not just in fashion, if you are any brand, maybe you're making ceramic pots, whatever. If you are working for a brand, or you are the brand representative and you want to make the decision to be more sustainable, what are some of the things you would want to tell that person to help them on that journey?
Madi, do you want to kick us off, and then maybe Ellie, you can follow up?
Yeah. That's an incredibly hard question, and you know, especially for these massive corporations, we know there's the decision-making method behind these corporations is massive, and they're very much driven by revenue, so we totally understand that. I think there's a couple things I reckon they could start to change. I think the first thing is the amount that they're producing and how quickly they're producing these garments. I think that is the lack of slow fashion within the fast fashion realm is a big problem, and the fact that they are pushing overconsumption daily and manipulating people into buying and overconsuming. I think that's one aspect, and then the second aspect would be owning this mass production and doing something about it, whether that's introducing upcycled lines or taking in people's old clothes and reproducing them into something else, actually trying to close the loop. I think that's probably two things I would say. Not sure about you. What do you think, Ellie?
Building on that, I reckon it's really because there's so many variables to the supply chain. There's definitely things that even some big fast fashion brands are already doing around materials. They're sourcing really trying to focus a bit more on sustainability, and so that's great. But as Madi said, if you're producing at scale, like, you're still utilizing a lot of water, a lot of minerals, chemicals, all of that. So I mean, that's the number one thing they can do, but that's very unlikely. But I mean, the fair labor, fair trade, making sure that factory conditions and all of that are at a really high standard, and being really transparent about that, I think that could be a fantastic starting point. I don't know if you saw or I'm sure you would have heard of Shein out of China. They are basically a very the biggest fast fashion. I actually saw a graph, and they're like I think 10 times bigger scale than H&M, Zara, all of them combined. So it's actually that they are primary, like the biggest problem in the world today. And some of their garments, their care labels in the garments actually have people have said, "Help me." So there is, and that's like all over social media, which is like absolutely horrific if you think about what must be going on behind the scenes. So for me, fair labor is just something globally, you know, like that's just horrific. And then offsetting carbon emissions, there's a lot of obviously the scale of fast fashion coming all the way from Europe to New Zealand and all around the world. Like, that's just going to be we're like we're 10%, fashion industry is 10% of the global emissions, which is more than the aviation industry, which is horrific. So there's that as well. And this, I mean, the biggest pain point I see as well is just these big massive sales that fast fashion outlets have at such low price points, to the point of like $5 t-shirts, where they're just trying to remove stock so they can bring more stock in. So like looking at that model and going, do we need to go, how can we reduce the sale side and pushing things just out the door for new stock? It's really disgusting, because that holds no value. It also holds no value for a second life, because it's made so poorly. It's not going to last even if you do upcycle it. Like, it's just made in a bad way. So that's the fast fashion question. And then to your question, Steph, around someone trying to be better as a business, we've really this one has been one that I've thought about a lot as well, because we started, and Madi and I have made a lot of choices based on trying to do better for the planet that has been a massive cost to us. Like, not gonna lie, is doing better, doing organic, even tote bags and made in New Zealand, and they cost us a fortune. And whether consumers will ever know that or appreciate that, I mean, it's just something that we value as a brand. And so I know that a lot of people starting out, resources and money is really, really hard, and sustainability is a really high cost at the moment because it's not the norm, because these big corporations have made it really hard for us to be good for the environment. So, it's just really, if you're thinking about it, you're in the right place, because you would think about reducing your footprint, your packaging, your electricity, and I mean, it's a lifestyle, it's a way of thinking, and if you're already thinking in that way, then that is the way of the future. I genuinely believe no consumers are going to support any brands that don't have that as an ethos, as a core ethos. And we are so powerful. Social media is so powerful. And I think the world is moving in a much better place, but it is a little bit slow and expensive.
So, one of the things that I want to talk about, because we kind of went a little bit into fast fashion and how it relates to the creatives, and then we spoke about this sort of big problem. And I think it's good that we can speak to that challenge a little bit, because I think it is good if we manage to change even one person in a fast fashion brand. I think that's a worthwhile endeavor. But maybe what I want to talk a little bit about, speaking a little bit towards some of the brands that you guys have. Let's say, for example, we have somebody who is either like just a small-time fashion designer, or somebody who is interested in getting involved with Maverix and kind of like what you guys are doing and the approach that you're taking. Can you maybe walk us a little bit through what that process looks like, how you guys engage with new brands or new lines, and what they might expect if they are considering kind of joining you guys?
Absolutely. I guess the process that we have at Maverix is we do a lot of research into brands to figure out who's out there, who's doing right by the environment, who fits our look and feel and aesthetic and the types of customers that we do have. Either, we get approached by brands all the time, or we're actually reaching out to brands who we think are going to align with us. We get on a video call and basically walk through their entire supply chain, what they're doing in the way of sustainability, how they're playing into this slow fashion model, and then I guess their values and goals as a business. And then, from that point onwards, we basically support them in the way of, marketing them. We do bespoke shoots with every single brand that we stock. So we've got amazing content that they can also utilize across their own brands. We do blogs, we do interviews. We try and support these brands, small or big, as much as possible, and, introduce them to the New Zealand customer and the New Zealand market. And just try and, I guess, continue this relationship with them and bring them on this journey with
We also
Maverix
really
in our
want to
community.
support designers who are really unique and have a certain style. Our curation is quite different, especially with the New Zealand market, and we really do pride ourselves on that. Our Made by Maverix line was a basics line to sort of fill this gap of these incredible designs within that. And it's not to say that they're trends or pieces that will be outdated, but they're really based on craft and art, and there's always like this amazing inspiration behind them. And so we are a little bit selective with who we do stock, but so it is kind of based off uniqueness and new and exciting, and because we're trying to make sustainability cool.
Nice. I do have one question I want to ask you guys on your more personal journey related to you both being fashion lovers and now stepping into creating this business and running this business and being very aware of where your clothes come from and zooming in on, how it's made, all of the processes and etc. Do you still feel like you are lovers of fashion and you're able to fulfill that love for fashion?
Yeah, it's I've gone through a real wave starting this business because we were super excited to launch and showcase these insane beautiful pieces, and then Maddie and I got in a really negative place where we were nervous about putting things on sale and pushing consumption because that wasn't what we were here to do. And we had to really move past that because we knew that people are going to shop no matter what. Yeah. And if they're going to make a better decision, they're going to buy a top anyway, right? So if they're going to make a better decision than that, then that's going to be us, because we know that we've done the work to be a better choice. So we went through a real imposter, like, what are we doing? This isn't what we set out to achieve, but actually it is. And the world moves and people buy clothes. And so, so that wave was a little bit like, I don't want to ever buy anything again because we're destroying the planet, to back up, like, no, this is how we live, but it can be done in such a better way. And my love for fashion has just like grown exponentially. If anything, I just want to be stocking so many more brands. So we're very excited to grow and find these amazing brands all through social media. Some only have like 500 followers and just launched, and we want to give them this platform and photograph and build these campaigns. And Maddie and I would love to expand on our own brand as well. That's a really big goal for us. And I love the industry, love and hate it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, same, very similar for me. I think I am fashion and clothes obsessed. Like, I seriously spend all day looking at clothes and trying to find new designers. So I will forever have a love for the industry. And I think before we got into this, people did warn us about, the harsh side of fashion, and there is definitely downfalls within this industry, and it's bloody hard, and we've been quite naive through this process, not coming from that fashion background, and we've been exposed to sides of the industry we didn't want to be, but like Ellie said, at the end of the day, we're always going to buy clothes. We all express ourselves through what we wear, and if we can mindfully make better choices and help people do so, like, that's a win-win in my eyes.
Nice. I like that. And I see you guys also do your own photography as well. I saw on the YouTube video the behind the scenes and your impressive setup as well. So I guess at least you still have that creative expression as well, playing with the pieces you get from designers.
It is hard work, though, I tell you. I think being in the creative industry and always having to think creatively, it gets incredibly draining, especially trying to come up with ideas every single day. So we do battle with that quite a lot, and we've put this pressure on ourselves to shoot content ourselves rather than repurposing content, because we do have that creative eye and we do have that those skills, and we want to showcase the clothing in their most like raw and authentic state as well. Like, these big model e-com shoots is not an accurate representation of what these clothes look like on real people, so we really took that upon ourselves to do all of that. But it's very hard. It is very hard sometimes, but we do love it. It is a big part of it.
I also like the fact that you guys take that approach, because when you decide to shoot all your own content and you're actually interacting with your own product, which I guess a lot of people won't if you're just the middleman, right? Just stocking the product that goes past you almost, where now you're really interacting with it. You're actually getting a feel for the fabric, the way it looks in the light. Like you said, there's consistency in the way you present it to consumers, which also builds a trust, because now they know it's been through the two of you, right? You vetted.
If anything, it makes 100%. Us want to buy everything.
Oh yeah, we try everything on.
Oh wow. I love that.
Yeah, it's good though, because like me and Ellie, we both have very different body types. So it's good for us to try everything on and be like, yes, this is going to suit this body shape, or people should size up here or style it this way. It actually helps consumers make the right choice for their body shape, which is fun for us. We love.
That's amazing. All right. Well, I think we headed into the closing part of this conversation. Maybe before I ask you guys, or let me ask you the last two questions. The first one is, are there any specific brands or designers you want to shout out to? Either designers you are hosting at the moment, or maybe some bigger brands that you feel are actually doing the work?
I think fashion brand that we love and we look up to is Garni. We don't stock them currently, but I think in the way of sustainability, they are doing incredible things and pushing innovation in that space as well. So we massively look up to them and admire them as a brand.
Yeah, I mean, and then within the brands that we stock, a massive highlight and a brand that has just grown rapidly over the last couple of years is Paloma Wool, the practices are just incredible. They pride themselves on their materials, and everything is based on art and real inspiration, timeless inspiration. So they everyone is really catching on to them as well. So we're super excited and stoked to have them as a designer on our website. But yeah, they're amazing. But I agree with Maddie. We look up to Garni a lot. They're great.
Nice. I remember the Pomona Wall name when I used it in the designs. At first, I thought it was a placeholder like Lorem Ipsum, when you guys gave me some copy placeholders. But then I did a bit of research.
Love it.
That's amazing. And maybe one last question before we end off this discussion. So it's sort of a new segment that we're adding to the show, is allowing our past guests to ask our current guests a question. And so this question is from Chart. He's a colleague of mine and a innovation specialist. And his question was, if you could have lunch with any person, fictional, living, or dead, who would it be? And maybe, Maddie, you can kick us off.
Oh, that's a hard question.
It is.
Maybe Steve Jobs. I'm going to say Steve Jobs, as cliche as that is.
I think that's a good choice.
Big fan.
I have a couple that
Really?
I really admire. One from I've always really admired Brené Brown. I think her books and her way of life would just be so amazing to talk to. But second, and one of Maddie and I's absolute idols is Stephen Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO podcast. I would just love to meet him. He would be so interesting.
Love.
Amazing. And I'm actually going to turn this one on us as well. Steph, do you have someone who you would like to have a lunch with?
Sure. I think I'm going to bring it back home. I think I would say my grandmother. She passed away when I was 20. And I just feel like now, as a more mature version of myself, there's so much that I now appreciate of her that I would have liked to engage with her on this emotional, mature level, then I wasn't able to.
Mm-hmm. Amazing.
You, Alfie?
Mine is an interesting one, and I encourage anyone who's got the time to go and look him up. And it's a guy called Shaka Senghor. And he's got an amazing story. He was imprisoned when he was very young, I think, even before he'd become an adult. And he spent a fair amount of time in prison, because, he was in prison for, I think it was murder. So he did like a very long stint. But during that time, he sort of became the head of a gang in the prison. But his gang was kind of different. Like, they used to eat together all the time. He educated a lot of them. They used to exercise together. And then when he eventually left the prison, all the people that were in that gang started like a community development program. And then they went back to like his hometown and started building up there. So I definitely love to speak to him. Yeah, he's got a very, very inspirational story. And I think he was even on Oprah. Very cool guy. But I think
interesting.
Amazing.
That is that for today. Thank you very much for making the time, Ellie and Madi. It's been really great speaking with you guys. But maybe, one last thing before we do close curtains. Where can people find you? Like, what is the best place to follow? What are the social handles?
You can follow us at By Maverix, BYMAVERIX on Instagram. Our website is www.bymaverix.com, and TikTok, which is going to be a big focus for us, is also By Maverix.
Amazing. So, for everyone listening, thank you very much for your time, and definitely give them a follow. And have a wonderful day.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys next time.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.